This is the new iPad Pro. It's super thin.
That's true.
It's using the new powerful M4 processor. The professional creator can now use it to edit videos and create music.
Well,
the display uses new tandem OLED to get super bright.
yeah.
The front camera is now on the horizontal edge.
Where it should have been.
And the new Apple Pencil Pro has new features.
Hold on. So yeah, the new iPad is super thin. And if you've used any of the previous iPads, you'll notice. If this is your first iPad, or if it's been a while, then you'll be pretty impressed with how thin your iPad is. There's concern it might bend easy, but it's reinforced through the center, and it's actually quite stiff. This is the 11-inch version, which I think is the perfect size for most people, though some might want that extra 2 inches. The display is super nice, and it's the first time Apple's using OLEDs in their iPads. It can get up to 1000 nits of brightness, which is the same indoor brightness as the iPhone 14 Pro series and all the 15 series. This is the nicest display on an iPad, but if you don't have another iPad to compare it to, then it doesn't really feel like that big of a jump forward. There are 2 changes to the cameras on this iPad. The first is that there's only 1 camera on the back, and the second is that the camera on the front is finally where it should be. Unless you're reading a book, I would assume that the majority of people don't hold their iPad like this. Having the front camera up here will help improve the way that video calls look. It'll be less obvious that you're using an iPad. Outside of document scanning, you're not really going to be using the camera for much else, unless you're older. This is the same rear camera as the iPad Pro and the iPad Air. It's 12 megapixels at f1.8. So if you're buying an iPad to take pictures with it, please just get the 10th generation iPad. There's no change to the battery life. It's still the 10 hours quoted by Apple of web surfing. So here's a question. If you could keep your iPad the same thickness as last year, but get 2 hours extra battery life, wouldn't you go for that? This is the new iPad Pencil Pro, and in a way it costs $728. That's because on its own, this new pencil isn't compatible with any older version of the iPad. So if you want to use it, you need at least an iPad Air. So that brings everything to $728. Or if you're going to use the iPad Pro, you're up to $1,128. The Apple Pencil has some new features like barrel roll, haptic feedback, and squeeze. The haptic feedback feels like what you'd expect from Apple, and it sounds like this. Squeeze is a feature that lets you open tools. I've been curious to see if it would false trigger while you're writing, but it only works when the pencil is away from the screen. For myself, I find I'm able to be more productive on a computer because I'm able to use keyboard shortcuts in combination with trackpad movements and just get things done faster. Let's take editing, for example. I'm able to move around the timeline and splice with keyboard shortcuts, where on the iPad I have to individually select each thing that I want to do. It just takes more time. I found something similar when I was studying and taking notes. It's really fun to take notes on an iPad, but at the end of the day, you can't really adjust certain things like where you want windows to be and how you want them to be laid out. Simple actions like copying and pasting are just a bit slower on the iPad. Well, unless you bring in the Magic Keyboard, which at that point brings your iPad Pro setup to the cost of an M3 MacBook Pro. It's still kind of the same tale. With a computer, you have the freedom to download whatever you want, and you're less likely to run into compatibility issues with everything. So if you're the type of person that's open to working around those restrictions, or if this is kind of a secondary device, then by all means, an iPad is great. All these new features are great, but they're kind of like luxuries. And when it boils down to it, you can still all do the same stuff on an iPad Air, which I think is the best option for most people. Or you could get an M3 MacBook Pro. An iPad is still an iPad, and a Mac is a Mac. And I think they're complementary, or you're the type of person who just loves using one over the other. The new iPad Pro is awesome, but I don't think it's restricted by iPadOS. I think it's restricted by being a tablet, and the fact that you would have to price it up to the point of being a computer to be able to use it the same as a computer, if that makes sense. What do you think?